Right now, millions of people are experiencing genuine emotional distress because 11 strangers they've never met just lost a game. They're screaming at screens, painting their faces, calling into work sick the day after a championship loss. Meanwhile, there's a massive population who watches this phenomenon with complete bewilderment. Not judgment, just genuine confusion about why anyone would invest that much emotional energy into something they have zero control over. And according to neuroscience, this isn't about personality differences or life choices. It's about fundamentally different brain architecture. If you've ever been asked, did you see the game, and felt that moment of disconnection, that brief social awkwardness where you realize you're supposed to care, but genuinely don't, this is for you. Because what I'm about to break down will completely reframe how you see both the sports fanatics in your life and your own complete indifference to their passion. This isn't about which approach is better. It's about understanding why your brain literally processes competitive spectator activities differently than 60% of the population. Let's start with what's happening in the brain of someone who's deeply invested in sports. Humans evolved as tribal creatures. For hundreds of thousands of years, group membership meant survival. Your tribe protected you, helped you hunt, kept you alive. Modern sports fandom is essentially hijacking that ancient circuitry. When someone watches their team, their brain releases oxytocin, the same bonding hormone that creates attachment to family members. Neurologically, their brain is treating these athletes as part of their survival group. It's not a choice, it's automatic neurochemical response. But here's where it gets fascinating. People who don't care about sports show significantly lower activation in this tribal bonding circuitry. Psychologists studying group identity have found that sports-indifferent individuals demonstrate what they call weak in-group bias. Their sense of self isn't as tightly connected to collective identity. They're more comfortable existing as autonomous individuals rather than members of a larger tribe. A 2019 study showed that people with low sports interest display dramatically reduced us versus them thinking. They don't automatically dislike opposing teams. They don't experience the rivalry as personal threat. Their identity simply isn't constructed around group membership, the same way. Now let's talk about what's happening during an actual game in a sports fan's brain, because the neuroscience here is legitimately concerning. Every play triggers anticipation. Every possession creates uncertainty. And uncertainty is neurological gold. The brain releases dopamine not when you get the reward, but in anticipation of potentially getting it. Sports fans are essentially getting microdosed with dopamine hits throughout the entire game. Studies using fMRI scans show that watching your team activates the same reward pathways as gambling, certain drugs, and other highly addictive behaviors. The kicker? The unpredictability is exactly what makes it so neurologically powerful. If you knew your team would win, the dopamine response would be minimal. But because the outcome is uncertain, your brain stays in this elevated anticipation state for hours. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement, the most addictive reward schedule known to behavioral science. It's the same mechanism that makes slot machines so effective. Your brain can't distinguish between different sources of dopamine. It just knows it wants more. People who don't care about sports, their dopamine systems simply aren't triggered by vicarious competition. And this might be partially genetic. Research from the University of Chicago suggests that variations in dopamine receptor genes can predict engagement with competitive spectator activities. Your complete indifference to whether the Lakers win or lose might literally be encoded in your DNA. You're not choosing to be uninterested. Your neurochemistry just doesn't respond to that particular stimulus. There's also a psychological phenomenon called burging, basking in reflected glory, that explains a lot about sports fandom. When their team wins, fans say we won. When their team loses, they lost. Notice the pronoun switch. Fans are unconsciously managing their self-esteem by associating with success and distancing from failure. People who don't obsess over sports tend to have more stable self-concept. They don't need external victories they had no role in creating to feel successful. Their sense of worth isn't dependent on outcomes they can't control. Now, before this starts sounding like sports fans are somehow psychologically inferior, let's address something fascinating. Sports fans often score higher on certain empathy measures. They practice caring deeply about other people's struggles, even strangers wearing the right jersey. They've developed the capacity to feel genuine emotion about someone else's performance. That's not nothing. So why don't non-sports people feel that same empathy for athletes? It's about empathy allocation. Everyone has limited capacity for emotional investment. Sports-indifferent people tend to direct that empathy toward different targets, social causes, personal relationships, creative pursuits, intellectual challenges. A 2021 study found that people with low sports interest scored significantly higher in openness to experience and aesthetic appreciation. They're getting their emotional rewards from art, music, nature, ideas. Their brains are seeking the same things sports fans seek, meaning, connection, transcendence. They're just finding those experiences in different domains. Neither approach is superior. They're simply different strategies for meeting the same fundamental human needs. But there's also a shadow side worth acknowledging. For some people, sports indifference is actually defensive. Maybe they were bullied in gym class. Maybe they felt excluded by sports culture. Maybe they're reacting against the aggressive competitiveness that often surrounds fandom. Your disinterest might have a backstory you haven't fully examined. Or maybe you genuinely just find it boring. Both are valid, but it's worth knowing which one you're experiencing. The fundamental disconnect between sports fans and non-fans often comes down to how each group experiences meaning. Sports fans find meaning in narrative. The underdog story, the comeback, the dynasty, the rivalry. It's compelling precisely because it's unpredictable, real drama with genuine emotional stakes. Non-sports people often find that randomness meaningless. They think, why would I emotionally invest in an outcome I can't influence, performed by people I don't know, in a game that doesn't affect my actual life? Neither perspective is wrong. They're just different approaches to the human need for story and significance. Researchers studying parasocial relationships have found that sports fans build one-sided emotional connections with teams and players. Non-sports people prefer investing emotional energy where there's reciprocity, where their care actually matters to outcomes, where they're participants rather than spectators. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who studied flow states, found that complete absorption can be achieved through countless activities. For some people, that's watching sports. For others, it's literally anything else. The mechanism is the same. The trigger is different. Here's something that might explain why non-sports people sometimes feel quietly superior, even though they'd never admit it. They often report feeling more present in their own lives. While sports fans spend hours every week experiencing someone else's struggle, non-fans are engaged in their own challenges, their own creative projects, their own personal development. There's something quietly radical about choosing to be the protagonist of your own life, rather than a spectator in someone else's. But again, sports fans could argue they're practicing community, loyalty, shared experience. Both have value. So what does all this actually mean? If you don't care about sports, you're not missing some fundamental human experience. You're not broken. You're not boring. Your brain's reward circuitry, tribal bonding mechanisms, and empathy allocation systems are simply calibrated differently. You're finding meaning, connection, and emotional engagement through different channels, and that's not just okay, it's neurologically normal for a significant portion of the population. The next time someone asks if you saw the game and you genuinely couldn't care less, you don't need to apologize or feel socially deficient. You're not playing a different game, you're playing the same game of finding meaning and connection. You've just chosen a different field. And honestly, your field might have fewer commercials and significantly less screaming. Understanding this isn't about proving your way is better. It's about recognizing that neurological diversity in how we bond, find meaning, and experience reward is just as valid as any other form of human variation. Drop a comment if your team sport's indifferent, and let me know which domain you direct your emotional energy toward. Instead, art, ideas, personal projects. I'm genuinely curious, and if you want to understand other ways your brain might be wired differently from the majority, subscribe, because the world is full of neurological variations that get mistaken for personality flaws when they're actually adaptive differences. Your sports indifference isn't a bug in your social programming. It's a feature of your particular neurological architecture. And recognizing that difference, understanding where it comes from, and refusing to apologize for it, that's not just self-awareness. That's how you stop letting the majority define what's normal